Well, good morning. I hope you're having a good day on this mid-December morning. Another session of the Michigan State Legislature will be drawing to a close, and for some legislators, it will mark the end of their service. This morning, we'll talk with a veteran member of that group. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, our guest this morning is in the final days of his final term in the Michigan Senate. Prior to 8 years in the Senate, he also served as a member of the State House of Representatives for 6 years. He has established a reputation as an effective legislator and has been a regular guest on this show. It's good to have him with us as he is about to wind down his legislative career. Pleased to welcome back to the Ryan Report, State Senator Tom Casperson. Nice to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thanks, Don.
You know, first of all, right off the bat, you suffered some really serious health issues earlier this year. How are things going now?
They're going very well. Thank you for asking. The reports we've been getting, the PET scans, all the things that you look at to see if there's been improvement have all been improvements for me. I feel better. It really has been quite a ride, and you know, I'm one that believes in the power of prayer, and I can tell you that I had prayers going out for me all over the country. The cards were coming in. It really was amazing to see all that happen, and the people in the healthcare field, the way they've handled it has been amazing. I've been treated both at Marquette, I've been treated in Dickinson, Escanaba, and the University of Michigan, and every one of them have been top-notch.
And when you go through things like that, you certainly begin to realize where your priorities have to be, don't they?
You sure do. I can tell you, Don, when I was told in the hospital after the biopsy, it came out of the room, and the doctor came in to tell me, and I had my youngest son with me and his wife, Dane and Brittany, and then my chief of staff, Marty, was with me. And the rest of the family was waiting for a conference call. When you get the word you have stage 4 lung cancer and you're not a smoker, that's pretty tough news. I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks, and you know what goes through your mind. And I can tell you what didn't go through my mind. I wasn't worried about legislation. I wasn't worried about what was going on in Lansing. I was thinking of my family and thought, boy, I've got to really get my affairs in order.
But yet, hopefully there's a happy ending to this story.
Yeah, I'm with you, Don. I feel really good.
Based on your experience, you have some pretty positive things to think about healthcare too, don't you?
We do, yeah.
We have some real possibilities probably in dealing with cancer.
We do. I mean, when you look at my case, as I mentioned, when you get those words, you know, you have stage 4 lung cancer, it almost is like, get your affairs in order. That's what you hear. You don't almost hear the stage 4, you just hear get your affairs in order. But based on the treatments and how it's affected me, when you look at the difference in a short period of time, I do believe in our lifetime we're getting there. I think that the term cancer is going to change dramatically from one that was put fear in people, like their lives have come to an end somehow because of that terrible disease, to one that it's going to become treatable. I think they know much more about it, how to attack it, how to get after it. And in my case, it really was a matter of they have now understood how to help your body attack it, your own immune system, to go after the cancer, and that's really what happened for me.
Okay. Let's hope that continues. Let's talk a little politics. You know, I was surprised to read the other day that of the Michigan Senate, 30 of 38 members are leaving.
It's a mass exit. Yep.
What effect does that have on governance?
It has a lot, and I've said that, you know, from the beginning, even in the House, the changeover in the House has been incredible. It's my concern with all of this is always been the same, and that is that the government itself, the departments themselves, become powerful, and not necessarily to be that it's always in a bad way, but I think it's not a healthy thing when the government ends up being powerful enough that they actually could govern around the legislature, because we're the voice of the people. The people have an opportunity with us at the ballot box. And if they don't like what's happening, they can express that at the ballot boxes. But what's happening right now is with that many people turned over, I can tell you in my 8 years in the Senate, I believe I was more effective than I was in the 6 years in the House, simply by the experience and getting to know who's who and understanding how the departments work and just kind of getting that feel of the lay of the land. Now we're leaving and the new class comes in and starts all over again. And the departments don't leave; they stay there. It's the same people, right. same type of agendas, those type of things, and that's a real concern.
Maybe someday people will address this term limit issue, but nobody seems to want to really do that.
Yeah, it looks, for the legislature to do it, you know, we get accused of being self-serving, you know, that we want to stay there. I'll tell you, Don, I've served 14 years in the legislature, and I've told people, and I mean this, I've been a blessed man to be able to do something like this. It's been a chance of a lifetime. Not many people will ever get to do something like this, and I've been fortunate to be one of those people that had the opportunity. But I can also tell you, after doing it for 14 years, I think there was a reason why the average person served 12 to 14 years before term limits. There's a given time, because if you do it right, you're going to give it your all, and you're on all the time.
Right.
And not, I don't say that to complain. I'm just saying that's the nature of what you're doing. And so that can be tough at times. You know, you take on a lot of burden. People have a lot of concerns, and you take that on. You're trying to help people, and you do that for that long of a period. It can be hard sometimes.
You have to look back at some of the old guys that represented the UP, the Dominic Jacobettis and the Rusty Hellmans. They really put in some service.
My goodness, did they ever, and they had to be, you know, I only met Dominic a few times, but he had to be a pretty good guy and a pretty tough guy, yeah, you know, to sustain it for that long.
Right. Let's talk about some of the things happening now, and there's some criticism about it, but, well, first of all, on Enbridge Line 5, and I know you've been very involved in that. Tell people what's going to happen and
yeah,
why it's important.
Well, what we've done is put in place the authority now that's going to set up and start the wheels in motion to start getting the engineering in place, the feasibility in place of how to do it. Can it be done? They've got to set up the geological side of it, I guess would probably be the only way I could describe it. That all has to be proven, and it has to be worked out before they even put a shovel in the ground. So those are the next steps. What we've done is put in place the ability for them to start that. And by that, I mean we put the authority in place. It was, we started out with the Bridge Authority, focused on them in the beginning of it. The main reason for that was because if you look at the Bridge Authority and its history, they have done really a miraculous job in taking care of the bridge. There's nobody that's complained about the Bridge Authority and how they've handled the affairs of maintaining the bridge. And I'd say the Mackinac Bridge is really quite a marvel, and it's still today quite a structure and a beautiful structure. So they were the clear choice to have them do this as well, because they were so good at managing that. Clearly there was people who didn't like that, didn't want that. They felt they should be separate, and that came through pretty loud and clear in testimony in the hearings. So that's why the shift in how we did it, and we set up a new authority.
Okay, we'll follow up on that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this 2-minute break. Once again, our guest this morning is State Senator Tom Casperson, who is finishing up his final term. Before we leave that Enbridge Line 5 story, opponents say that, you know, this would leave the opportunity for environmental disaster because it won't move fast enough. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's been the problem we've been faced with on everything with Line 5. My point when I've been in the middle of conversations is what I've asked for is, if you are going to suggest an alternative, first of all, show me a permit. And if you can't permit whatever that alternative is, then it isn't an alternative. And then there's those that just feel we should just shut it down. I believe that's being irresponsible, quite frankly, with the impact it would have on people and our way of life. And it's not just the Upper Peninsula with propane. It's far greater than that. We certainly understand the power issues up here when we lost Presque Isle, the impact that could have had on our citizens when those costs of that would have been shared by all of us to make the difference up. It would have been horrendous. It's similar with Line 5. UPCO, my understanding is UPCO supplies power for them. Same type of problem. You shut that line down, UPCO then is stuck with losing one of its largest users. So to make up the difference, ratepayers are going to pay it. And it's just, that's just one thing of many that of a domino effect if you shut that off.
One more thing on the lame duck. There are many things we could talk about, but I really want to have some time to look back with you. But you had a particular bill having to do with the ability of local government to cut down trees or to deal with, to regulate the cutting down of trees.
Sure.
Most people don't understand that. What was that about?
Well, it started, was brought to our attention with Canton Township. Canton Township had an ordinance in place that you must get permission to cut trees off your property And in this case, it was a property that they had zoned commercial. So the individuals involved with it had a commercial piece of property, wanted to clear the property to do, we were told, plant Christmas trees on it. So they wanted to change the trees that were actually on there. But ultimately what happened, they cut them down. Canton Township said you can't do that without permission, and they had to pay per tree how many trees they cut down. The bill was $450,000 for them taking trees off their own property. Most people I've talked to just shook their head and couldn't imagine that we would do something like that or have something in place like that, but they did. So we tried to address it and really narrow it down to the trees. Who owns the trees on your own personal property? In this case, it was commercial property, but what rights do we have, and at what point do we have to say enough's enough? And the legislature certainly agreed with us and said enough's enough. We've got to stop this. And so it's in the House. We've got one more shot at it this week to see if we can get it out of there. I think we got plenty of support if they move it.
Okay. What, you know, some people have accused you of being anti-environmental.
Sure.
Because of bills like this. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, I reject the notion that I'm anti-environmentalist because I disagree with environmentalists, meaning like a Sierra Club of the world, Michigan Environmental Council, the environmental groups. And when I say disagree, there's things I agree with them on, but they would go a lot farther than I would. Wetlands would be a prime example. We're trying to straighten some of that out. I believe we need to protect our wetlands. I've never argued that point, but to what level? When we're starting to regulate a ditch, we're starting to regulate 3 acres of a lowland on the back of somebody's property to the point we won't let them use it. At what point are we going too far? I would argue in some cases we've gone too far. And I've argued with the Sierra Club as an example. I've had debates with them, with Robert Gordon. He's a really good guy. I talk a lot with him. And I've said, Robert, the environmental community should take victory laps for the good things they've done to really change the culture of how we think in America and about the environment. But what they also should do is stop treating us like we're still back in the 50s and 60s and give some credit where we've made gains and had high standards and work with people to still function and do things. And I think that's where our rub comes in, our differences are.
We'll be back to share some more memories in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Once again, we're talking with Senator Tom Casperson. You've already mentioned that you feel it's been a real honor to have been able to do this. What other thoughts do you have as you kind of look back at those 14 years in Lansing?
It's been amazing to see that, one, you know, getting elected to a position like that, if you work at it, you can affect some change. I would argue that not just myself, but my colleagues, we have affected some changes in Michigan, maybe some of the directions, and I would argue in some cases for the better. When I was in the House, Governor Granholm, I came in with Governor Granholm. We started serving at the same time. She was dealt a tough hand. I mean, the state started going backwards and we were in trouble, and she came in with us, and we were trying desperately to get that resolved and get the state turned around and moving in the right direction. Took some time, but through a course of some actions and things that ultimately got done when we went into the Senate, we made some tough decisions, and the state is, you can't argue the state has turned around. It's not perfect, but boy, what a change. And to be able to be a part of that and actually see where you can affect change, that's pretty neat.
Probably all those car trips to Lansing weren't the highlight of it, were they?
No, I didn't mind the driving so much as I did the weather. And you were guaranteed a snowstorm in the Great Gaylord-Grayling area or somewhere along US 2, either going or coming home.
You know, I did have an opportunity to see a report, and you've been very effective. I know you're very committed, but you've been very effective at getting bills passed. What's the secret to your success in that sense?
If I could say anything, Don, I think it's relationships. You know, no one person can do anything. I need 20 votes in the Senate, 56 votes in the House, and a governor's signature. If you were to go in and, I guess, kick doors in and make demands and say, I'm here and you better do what I want, and that's your attitude, you might get a few things done, but I think you'll find you'll grind to a halt. People won't trust you, or they don't want to deal with you. And I think if I've been effective, I would hope it's because people would say that I've worked with them and they've gotten to know me and trust me. In a lot of cases, some of the stuff I have worked on, they probably don't deal with it in their district, so they have to rely on me. And I think I've been very fortunate to have good colleagues, and they did put a lot of trust in me.
And would you agree that one thing too has been the ability of UP legislators to work together? And I know you and Representative John Keevil really took a leadership role in making
That was
happen.
when I got into the Senate, and when John and I and Ed and Scott came together, that was a turning point of big proportions, and it made things so much easier. And when we would testify on stuff together, it was almost checkmate, game over, because nobody in the committee was going to really challenge you too hard, because we took the politics out of it. When we focused on the policy, and if it was good policy, we defended it. And I can't think of any time we stuck together like that we lost.
And John was also very big on relationships too, wasn't he?
Exactly. He took the same MO, and he was respected for that very quickly.
And you've had a staff that's been pretty much with you through your time too. I assume that's been pretty important.
Marty has been with me. All my staff has stayed with me. The front desk changed a couple times. One guy, Andrew Pike, committed to me for 4 years. He's a teacher by trade, and he wanted to get into the political world and try it a little bit. We thought he was a little overqualified. We weren't quite sure about him because he was so good. We thought, boy, he can't be for real, but he was. And he gave me 4 years, but his heart and his passion was with teaching, and he committed to the kids in South Korea, actually, and he went back to South Korea teaching, and then Hannah came on board. Otherwise, everybody's been with me from the beginning, and they stayed with me right to the end, which is pretty abnormal with term limits and how that all works.
Do you have any advice for Ed McBroom, who's taking your place, or Greg Markinen, who's going to be new in the legislature from the West End, and all the new lawmakers?
Yeah, they're all pretty capable, but I guess if I had any advice, I would say make sure to put good people around you, and then trust those people and work with them.
Are there frustrations that you weren't able to do some things?
Yeah, you know, with the concepts of some of the regulatory stuff that I did work on, there was a few that didn't make it that ultimately I found out it was more, I didn't make it because of political reasons versus policy reasons, scientific reasons. And you have to accept that sometimes. That's kind of a reality. And so that was a little bit frustrating, knowing we were right on the science, but we couldn't win on the politics of the day. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. And you know, Governor Snyder has been a good friend. I've appreciated his leadership, and I know that we don't agree on everything. I'm sure I'm one of the legislators that probably has the most vetoes out of all the legislators, but that's okay. We can disagree, but it's been good.
Any future plans at this point?
This point, I'm going to start out with Ed. I'm literally going to switch roles with him,
Okay.
do a little traveling with him. He knows that there's some other things that I'd like to work on if I could eventually, but for right now, I've agreed to go with him, and I'm looking forward to it.
Any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Just, you know, we need to work on civility and come together, and that, I think, constituents, we the people play a role in that too. It's not just, you see the Republicans and Democrats going after each other, but we see people doing it too, and it's part of our culture. And I would argue that we can be better than that, and our kids are watching, and I think it's important that they see something different. And I would just remind all of us to remember that the kids are watching.
Well, best of luck with your health and with all you do in the future.
Thanks, Don.
It's been great having you as one of our regular guests.
It has been great being here.
I'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. Well, by now, many of you probably have your Christmas tree up and decorated. It's fun to see the different choices people make as they decorate their trees. Some are very classic, almost sophisticated. Others are very folksy and especially appealing to children. But what I really wanted to talk about today is Christmas tree lights. You know, when I was a kid growing up, we had what I think was probably traditional for most people. The lights maybe, I don't know, 1.5 inches high, you know, round on the top and tapered and wider at the bottom. They were pretty lights, but they also got pretty hot, which could be dangerous on a dry tree. Perhaps it was that issue that led to the introduction of the smaller twinkle lights that most everyone started using. They were pretty, they were colorful, and they usually contained more lights in a string than the older style. But the original twinkle lights came with one major drawback. If one of the lights burned out, the whole string went out, which led to one of the most frustrating experiences a person could ever have. You may remember this. Because the lights were all off, you had to try to find the problem by going through the whole string, which might include 50 or 100 lights. Oftentimes the lights were already on the tree, and you had to try replacing each bulb to see if it was the one causing the problem. The fact they were plug-in lights made it even more difficult because if you didn't get the bulb in just right, they wouldn't work. I can tell you there was more than one occasion when I was ready to scream and tear out my hair. Thankfully, they made improvements that eliminated this problem. So nothing could be as frustrating as those lights, but I did manage to find some new ones a couple of years ago that came with their own annoying issue. Our plan was to invest in some LED lights. The set we bought had bulbs similar in shape to the ones I mentioned at the beginning, just a little larger. And they're lights that change color from all white to multicolored. They come on in white, fade out, are off for a second, and then come back as multicolored. They change about every 10 seconds. Now here's the annoying problem. We have 3 strings of these lights, and when you turn them on, 2 strings light up multicolored and 1 is white. This is not the way you want your tree to look. We tried complaining to the manufacturer, but they didn't have an answer for us. So this is what we must do. Every time we turn the lights on, we have to unplug set number 2 from set number 3 and then plug them back together at just the right moment. Maybe it doesn't sound like such a big deal, but number 1, you have to do this every time you turn the lights on. Number 2, if you don't time it exactly right, then the lights are not in sync when they come off and on. So you have to do it again until you get it right. And number 3, what idiot would design a product that works like this in the first place? Oh well, we make it work. I think next year we'll buy new lights that don't change color. At least they're better than the original twinkle lights. I'll be back in a minute. Just about time for the Today Show to move in here. There is time to remind you that for news anytime, go to uppermichigansource.com, where you can also find a rebroadcast of this show each week. I was so pleased to have a chance to talk with Senator Tom Casperson today as he winds down his legislative career. He has been a good friend to this show and has served Upper Michigan very well. We wish him the best for the future. And I appreciate that you took time to join us today, and I hope that you will be here again next Sunday morning.